What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Crack a Pack series. I hope you all are doing extraordinarily well. I am doing fantastic today, and I'm very excited to be opening up a pack of Guilds of Ravnica. Obviously, a fairly recent set, just in the last year, but still a fantastic one. I do love this set quite a lot. I'm always a little bit partial to the Ravnica set, so it's really fun to be opening it here. Of course, we'll go through this as if it's a draft perspective, so we'll hopefully be able to determine what our reasonable first round draft pick will be. I did draft a little bit of this set, not so much, a little bit more of Ravnica Allegiance on my end, but I do know the cards fairly well, so hopefully we can get a reasonable assumption here. So, the first card here is Sure Strike. It's an instant for 1 and a red. Target creature gets +3/+0 and gains first strike until the end of the turn. Excuse me. This is actually a very common combat trick that we've seen a lot of in the recent years. A lot of reprints on this one, I feel like, but nonetheless, it is a very good combat trick. That being said, it is still a combat trick. Therefore, it's not something that you want to pick first by any means, but if you're in red and you're lacking on some tricks, definitely something to pick up. It is actually very good, in my opinion. Righteous Blow is an instant for 1 white. Deals 2 damage to target attacking or blocking creature. This is an okay, it basically is a combat trick because they have to be attacking or blocking, but it's a pseudo removal spell in my opinion. It's not necessarily as good as something like Murder or Doomblade or something like that, which is just straight up a removal spell. But this can definitely get you above and beyond in combat or do something like that. Maybe pick off something like a guild mage, something along those lines. In that instance, it's not bad by any means. However, I've found it to be a bit underwhelming. I think there are a lot of cases where this just does nothing. It is only 2 damage, and it also is very conditional in that they have to be attacking or blocking. It is very efficient, so that is kind of the plus side to a card like this. However, I'd rather have something just like Shock. 2 damage straight up, doesn't matter when. That's a little bit better, but this is very white flavored, so I get it. But not as good, in my opinion, as a lot of the other kind of pseudo removal spells that you could get. Vidalcan Mesmerist is a 2/1 for 1 and a blue. Whenever it attacks, target creature an opponent controls gets -2/-0 until the end of the turn. I found this to just be a filler card at best. It's not terrible, just because it's going to allow you to swing in a little bit more often than you normally could, but still, they're going to be able to block. It's not like, basically the upside here is that they're not going to be taking out your creatures quite as often, but they can still block. It's not doing anything about the toughness side of things, so while it does make attacks or blocks, I should say, a little bit more difficult on the opponent's side of the field, it isn't exactly the best thing in the world. I'd rather have like a removal spell or a tempo play that bounces it versus just shrinking the power of an opposing creature. Still, it's filler. It's definitely playable, but it's not amazing. Crushing Canopy is an instant for 2 and a green. You get to choose one, so destroy target creature with flying or destroy target enchantment. This is a quintessential flexible card, and I love flexible cards like this where you get to choose an option, and that makes it, obviously it's still only doing one thing, so it's not like it's overpowered, but it's better in multiple situations because you have 2 things to choose from, or in some cases even more. In this case, obviously, just 2, destroying a creature with flying is probably going to be the one you see most often used. I don't know if it's main deckable. I think you could probably get away with 1, but I would never run more than 1 unless I knew what I was up against. If I knew I was up against like a blue-white flyers deck, absolutely run more of these. But in general, this is much more of a sideboard tech kind of card, especially because flying, while still obviously a prominent part of this set and most sets in Magic, is definitely not like the focus. There's a lot of other things going on, multicolor cards, things like that. So yes, you probably will find something with flying, but it may not be the best target, and you might find a better slot in your deck for something else. And so for that reason, definitely more of a sideboard card, not something to first pick. Excuse me. Barrier of Bones is a 0/3 for 1 black. It has Defender, and when it enters the battlefield, you Surveil 1. So, Surveil, unique to this set, look at the top card of your library, and you may put that card into your graveyard. It's a lot like Scrying, except it puts it into your graveyard, not on the bottom of your deck, or on top of your deck. You get to, well, I guess you do get to either leave it there or put it in the graveyard. So, kind of like scrying. Surveil has a lot of synergy with the Dimir Guild, obviously by the watermark on the card. And generally speaking, this card is much more of just the enabler for that deck. It's not a very powerful card. It is a stall card, which I would say is very important in that deck because it's a bit of a slower deck, but once it gets going, it's fantastic. So I actually, so far, this is honestly my favorite card, which is pretty bad. That's not a very good one, but it is an enabler for that Surveil deck, so it's definitely something that I would want if I was going into that strategy. But again, this is, well, okay, I'll take this over it. So Pitiless Gorgon is a 2/2 for 1 and then 2 hybrid of either black or green. And it just has Death Touch. It's a very simple bear with Death Touch. And it costs 1 more, obviously, at 3 than just your average bear. But that Death Touch is actually very, very key for slowing down the game. Generally, in the green-black deck, you're looking to do some graveyard shenanigans, things like that. And I actually really like this card. I found it to be very, very good. It can really stall the game against big creature decks, aggro decks, anything like that, because it has Death Touch. It's going to be able to get around a lot of the other mechanics of the set and things like that. The only thing it really doesn't get around is First Strike, which is obviously a problem, but that's really the biggest issue against the Boros deck, not the majority of the decks that you're going to be seeing. And so I actually really like this card. It's still not necessarily a first pickable card, don't get me wrong, but so far, this is definitely my pick. Fresh-Faced Recruit is a 2/1 for 1 and then hybrid of either, red or white. And as long as it's your turn, the Fresh-Faced Recruit has First Strike. I find this to be a filler card as well. It's not amazing, but that First Strike is actually pretty key. Again, it gets around things like the Pitiless Gorgon, which is pretty cool. I mean, I like First Strike. In draft, it's a very, very good mechanic to have on your side, because it just makes combat a nightmare for the early turns of the game, especially for the opponent, but just because you're probably going to win combat the majority of the time. And so I do like it for that. Obviously, it's conditional First Strike only on your turn. Don't really like that so much. I like the Gorgon for the fact that Death Touch is permanent, so I would pick the Gorgon over this. Ooh, here we go. So Artful Takedown, this is a really good card. Also very flexible. It's an instant for 2 a blue and a black. You choose one or both, tap target creature, and target creature gets -2/-4 until the end of the turn. So this is such a good tempo play. This is very much a turning point for the Dimir deck. If you can play this on turn 4, bounce a creature, kill a creature off with that second ability, you're going to be in such better shape and you're going to be able to swing that game into your favor. This is much more of a key card for that deck, and so for that reason, this is 100% so far the pick. It's very good on tempo and very good as removal, so very, very premium card for that deck in my opinion. Definitely so far the one that I would pick. Excuse me. Samala Woodshaper is a 2/1 for 2, a green and a white, and when it enters the battlefield, you look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature or enchantment card from among them and put it into your hand. You put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. I found this card to be very underwhelming, solely because it's a 2/1 for 4. That's a really big drawback. It's nice because you do get to dig into your deck, and a lot of times you're going to be able to find a creature. Very, very often you will not whiff with a card like this, at least in Limited, especially in the Selesnya Guild. It's just packed full of creatures. So it makes sense that you would run this on turn 4 if you really needed it. But there, in my opinion, are a few better options out there. And so this, I've just found that this to be is much more of an underwhelming card because, yes, it digs you, but it just immediately dies after that most of the time. It's very outpowered very quickly. Devious Cover-Up is an instant for 2 and 2 blue, counter target spell. If that spell is countered this way, exile it instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard. You may shuffle up to 4 target cards from your graveyard into your library. Here we get to see a little bit more of that Surveil synergy, where you get to pull those cards back from your graveyard, so you get a second use out of all that stuff. Really, really fantastic. It is a good counter spell. A little high costed, but obviously late game you're looking to counter some of those bombs and then get a lot of value back on your own side. So this is really good. It kind of shows off, again, with Artful Takedown and something like Devious Cover-Up, it shows how that turning point on turn 4 with the Dimir deck is huge. You get to do a lot of really, really great things that hopefully swing that game back into your favor. A little bit slow in the early turns, obviously. It's not like a Boros deck where they're looking to beat down face as quick as possible, but really, really good at turning the game in their favor. And this is another one of those cards to do it. I would argue Artful Takedown is a much better card. It's 2-for-1 value most of the time. It's dependent, obviously, on what they have. This is obviously good, and then it counters the spell, so they don't get any enter the battlefield triggers, nothing like that. But the 4 cards going back into your library, while good, not the most amazing ability. I think being able to take out 2 creatures, theoretically 2, at once is much better. Excuse me. Beam Splitter Mage is a 2/2 for a blue and a red, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets only Beam Splitter Mage, if you control 1 or more creatures that spell could target, choose one of those creatures, copy that spell, and the copy targets the chosen creature. So essentially what this is used for mostly, I would say, in Limited, is to copy over a lot of your combat tricks onto multiple other creatures. It is actually pretty good for that. I personally like Artful Takedown more. That might be an incorrect assessment. Honestly, I'm a little bit partial to the Dimir Guilds, so maybe that's why I'm saying that. But I find that this is very much a target, and because it is only a 2/2, it's fairly easy to kill off a lot of the time. And so I don't really like it because, again, it's probably just going to die off pretty quickly. Whereas you're almost guaranteed the value out of Artful Takedown, again, unless there's a counterspell or something like that. So I would shy away from the Beam Splitter Mage. You have to have not only the Beam Splitter Mage out, you also are relying on having a card in your hand that pumps only it, and you're also relying on having another creature to get the added value out of Beam Splitter Mage. That's a lot to rely on, and that's considering your opponent has nothing to deal with any of these cards. And so I feel like that's a lot. I found it, again, it just seems to be a little underwhelming to me in at least Limited. I don't know, Constructed, I'd never have seen it played, but there might be a deck out there for it. Otran Assassin, I hope I'm saying that correctly, is a 1/1 for 1, a black and a green. It has Death Touch, and then all creatures able to block it have to. So really interesting card. It's very much the decoy style card where you swing in with this and a million other things, and then ideally you'll win the game right off the spot. It also has Death Touch, so it's going to be able to kill at least one thing right off the bat, which is great. If you have a combat trick with it, even better. I don't like this that much. I'd prefer to have a more powerful card at 3. This is good in that it's going to be able to block or swing in and make them block or do something like that. So you're kind of guaranteed, like, at least either a kill spell is going to have to deal with this or a creature will. But it is still just a 1/1. It's not the best thing in the world. I personally like the Takedown a lot more. Pilfering Imp is a 1/1 for 1 black. It has flying. You can pay 1 in a black, tap it, and sacrifice it. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it. That player discards that card, and you can activate this only at a time you could activate a sorcery. This isn't actually a very good 1-drop, I would say. It's not amazing in the grand scheme of things. It's a little bit slow, but it is still a 1/1 flyer, which is quite good. And also, being able to maybe pay 2, tap it, sacrifice it in response to a kill spell or something along those lines, pretty good, because you are going to get that extra value there, but you do have to leave up that 2 mana to do so. Not a huge fan of that. In Limited, it works out okay because there are going to be turns where you didn't have the best draw, probably need a place to sink a little bit of mana, and so in that case, it's great. But in general, I'm still very much on that Artful Takedown. It's just such a good card. But our rare here, Quasi-Duplicate, is 1 and 2 blue for a sorcery. Create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, and then you can jumpstart this. So you may cast this card from your graveyard by discarding a card in addition to paying its other costs, and then you exile this card from your graveyard. Honestly, I don't know how good this is in Limited. It's a very powerful card. There were actually a lot of standard decks that ran this just because it is very, very good. 2 copies from a single card is great. However, you're really dependent on having a good creature out, and I feel like if you don't have a good creature out, then this is just kind of a dead card in your hand. Yes, you can copy something very low ground and just like an easy target, but you're not going to get the value out of it. It's not going to be bag-breaking by any means. Your opponent can probably deal with it, and so for that reason, I don't love it. We also have a Golgari Guildgate, enters the battlefield tapped, adds black or green. In my opinion, honestly, the pick is Artful Takedown. That might be incorrect. Feel free to let me know in the comment section if you feel that it is. Quasi-Duplicate is a powerful card, so I definitely understand that argument. But if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like or a comment down below. And as always, please make sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of our awesome content. But with that, I'm going to get out of here. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next Crack-A-Pack video.